Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. Today is my March wrap up. I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in March. I read 9 books in March, one less than February and January. I DNF'd one. I would say DNA, but I mean DNF. DNF'd one, and I am still currently reading / listening to 3. So, done quite well. I will start with the book that I DNF'd, just to get it out of the way so we can just go on a roller coaster that's just going up afterwards. So I DNF'd my book that was in my TBR jar, DNF TBR. I DNF'd the book that was in my TBR jar, which was the Complete Short Stories Volume 1 of Roald Dahl. This is stories from 1944 to 1953, and the year really is shown in this book because these are war stories. Now, I don't really get on very well with war stories, and I found that I got to page 220, which is about, I must have read about 12 stories, so it's not even halfway through. I just didn't get on with them at all. I found them very repetitive. I found the characters, so like he basically used the same group of names for the characters in the books, which I imagine are probably friends of his when he was serving in the war, and he sort of did this in their honour, and they get repeated. They're in a lot of the stories, but they're not always the same sort of character, so they haven't. So even though there may be a Peter in one story, he's not the same Peter that's in the next story, but he's still called Peter. So I found this really hard to read. I was reading it one short story a day, and I didn't get on with it that way as well, because sometimes I fell behind, and I found myself like, oh God, I'm 3 stories behind. I better power through 3 stories. I did not really like any of them. The one I've sort of earmarked as one that I liked was about when some men went to a brothel and freed all the prostitutes that worked there. That was probably the best story, but yeah, I just wasn't enjoying it, and I keep saying to myself that I'm not being so hard on myself this year, so I just decided not to finish it. So 1 book out of my TBR jar, I'm not going to finish, and I've also got volume 2 of this, so I'm probably going to be giving these away, so if anyone wants them, let me know, because yeah, I just didn't get on with this at all, but that's not to say other people won't like it. Now, I'll go back to the beginning of the month when I finished It's Not Me, It's You by Mhairi McFarlane. Now, I've returned this to the library, so I don't have it in my hands. I enjoyed this, and unfortunately, at the beginning of the month, I was doing a lot of like, read a bit of this, read a bit of that, read a bit of this, read a bit of that, and it hampered my entire reading experience. I don't feel like I really got kick-started in March's reading month until midway through. I don't know if that happens to any of you guys, where you're sort of like doing a buddy read, trying to read short story collection, reading one of those a day, then trying to read that on top of that, then putting that down because you've got book club coming up and blah, 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 blah. So it was all a bit mad, and although I really liked this book, It's Not Me, It's You, I feel like I would have enjoyed it much, much more had I just read it clean straight through. I really like the main character, Adelia, and I particularly enjoyed hearing about her clothes and her taste in home decor and cooking. But I felt, in terms of storyline, it was like an awful lot of happy coincidences happened. So it was the story of a woman, Delia, whose boyfriend of a long time boyfriend cheated on her with a younger model, and she relocates from Newcastle to London and sort of comes to terms with it there, living with a friend and things like that. So it's quite contemporary, and I enjoyed it in terms of it being a contemporary book. But yeah, like I said, I think I would have enjoyed it much more if I'd just been able to sort of like power through it. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars, so it did quite well. The next book I read is also a book that I've returned to the library, and that is Asking For It by Louise O'Neill. This book is really difficult to talk about because enjoyed is a very difficult word to use when talking about a book that is about a girl who has been gang raped, basically. The subject matter is really hard to cover, and I think what Louise O'Neill has done in this book is that she made me realise, one of the messages I got across is that rape can happen to anyone. So the main character in the book, Emma, she's a complete bitch, basically. She's not a very nice person. She's sort of like queen bee of this tribe of pretty girls, and she's beautiful and all of this, but she's not a nice person with it. But in Louise O'Neill making that character like that, it makes you realise that it can happen to anyone. It doesn't always happen to the cutest girl, or like it doesn't always happen like in the films, for example, where it happens to somebody who's such a good person deep down. Like it can happen to someone who's a bitch. I read into it, and O'Neill herself said that she chose to end the book in a really bleak and sort of ambiguous way. And personally, I could have done with a bit more hope. I just feel like the whole book was really, I'm aware it is a book about a terrible subject matter, and I'm aware that me wanting a bit more hope at the end of the book defeats the object of the book, but I found it really hard to read, and that sort of like hampered my enjoyment of it, which this is not a book to be enjoyed, but it's a book to be like, oh my god. And I think it's really important, and I would urge people to read it in order to sort of get a feel for what it must be like to be a teenager these days. Like, I think it's really hard to be a teenager these days, but I found it really bleak, and I didn't enjoy it as much as Only Ever Yours, but I gave it 3 stars, so it wasn't too bad. The next book I read, I listened to the audiobook of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling, and I really enjoyed listening to this. This is the first audiobook of Harry Potter I've ever listened to, and it is narrated by Stephen Fry, who is just perfect at doing it. He does a really, really good job of doing all the voices, much better than I actually thought he would be. 2 things I will say though. He pronounces things differently to me. So, the prison where they send bad wizards, how would you say that? Say it now. Would you say Azkaban? Because I say Azkaban, and he says Azkaban. And also Malfoy, he says Malfoy. Like, I say Malfoy, and he says Malfoy. And I just found that a bit odd. But I really, really liked it, and it made me realise on listening to it how much of a recap book it is, like, and how much of a children's book it is at that early stage. It is only the 2nd book. But yeah, so it's like recapping basically everything that happened in the 1st book, and sort of making you realise how clever Hermione is and how brave Harry is and things like that. So it's a good, obviously it's Harry Potter and I love it, and I gave it 5 stars. Harry Potter forever. But yeah, it's probably my least favourite of all the books. If there is such a thing as a least favourite Harry Potter book, they're all perfect to me. But yeah, really loved listening to the audiobook of this. Found it a really nice, enjoyable way to get some Harry Potter into me. The next book I read was So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. This I read for my radio book club, and we were talking about non-fiction books in general, so quite broad, but I enjoyed reading this. I found this really, really interesting. God, it feels like a million years ago since I read this. And the case studies were all really relevant and current, and I was surprised how accessible and easy this was to read. So this is about people making a wrong joke on Twitter or on social media, and it coming back to bite them in the bum, basically. And it's talking about things that can be done for these people now, things that happen to these people. And I think this book should be used as a sort of educational lesson to anyone who uses social media. Anything you can say taken out of context, that can be used against you, and it can be bloody awful. And also, things that are on the internet forever. There's no like writing this down in your diary and then forgetting about it and chucking it in the bin. Like, that's out there forever. I'll definitely be checking out Jon Ronson's other books and his TED Talk on this subject, because I found it really, really interesting. And I was listening to him on radio too. And he was talking on there, and I found him just a really like compelling person to listen to. So really enjoyed that, and looking forward to more of his gear. The next book I read, the 5th book of the month, was A Time to Kill by John Grisham. That has also been returned to the library. I did this as a buddy read with Josh from Literary Gladiators. This is absolutely chock filled with plot, but I really feel like it could have been cut down a bit. I enjoyed it. I made the mistake, I watched the film many, many years ago of A Time to Kill, and I loved that film, and I didn't feel like the book lived up to the film, which was a bit awkward. It built up the main characters really well. Jake Brigance, who is the main lawyer in this story, is a really likeable but still flawed main character, and the secondary characters I felt were a bit glossed over. So it tells the story of a chap called Haley, whose young daughter is raped and left for dead basically by 2 hillbillies. God, a lot of rape this month. And left for dead by 2 hillbillies who then get tried for it, and he is a black guy, Haley, and his daughter is black, and he knows that the hillbillies will get off because of the fact that they raped a black girl basically. So he sort of takes the law into his own hands and kills the 2 hillbillies at the trial, and then it is Jake Brigance trying to get Haley off of the charge based on the fact that he wasn't feeling sane at the time. And it follows the trial from that. There's loads and loads going on. I just felt like it went on a bit too much for me, and I did enjoy the film. So I gave it 2 stars because it was a good book and I did enjoy it, but I liked the film more. And again, it was one of those things where I was reading like a little bit of this a day, a little bit of that day. I'm not doing that anymore because I like to read a book the whole way through. So far this month I've sort of been reading 2 and 3 star books, feeling a bit and then Then Jane the Fox and Me by Fanny Britt and Isabel Arsenault came along and cheered me up. So this was perfect for me. I read it in one sitting. I read it at night. I was in bed with a cup of tea and it was just beautiful, and I read it the whole way through, which I hadn't done in such a long time, and it was just an absolute joy to read. So this is a beautiful graphic novel. It's about a little girl called Helen who and how she's struggling with being bullied at school. So it's all told in sort of like this grey palette of like sketches, and then when she talks about Jane Eyre, or when she's reading Jane Eyre, now I've got to find it, it becomes colour, and it's just so beautiful. So sad in places, so sad. I love the way that the Jane Eyre parts were in colour and how she was able to escape by reading Jane Eyre. When you're reading it, you actually feel so sad reading the black and white parts, and then when the colour comes in, it's like a bit of a relief actually. It's very immersive, and I just loved it, and I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I actually think I'm probably going to buy this because I got it out from the library myself, and I really loved it. The 7th book of the month I read was also a little hurrah, and that was The Storied Life of JB Vickrey by Gabrielle Zevin. So I read this for my online book club, and I really loved this. So it tells the story of a young girl, Maya, who is left at a bookstore which is owned by the title character AJ Vickrey, and it goes throughout Maya's life and AJ Vickrey's life, and sort of like the ups and downs of that, romances, things like that. And it was just what I needed basically. It was really nice, heartwarming, and a fun read, and the characters were really well developed and likeable. And there was parts in this, and I loved, and I mean I bloody loved, the literary references in here. So obviously he owns a bookshop, so a lot of what he talks about is to do with books. And there's a part in there where he's talking about how when he was younger, all he wanted to do was eat the Turkish delight that Edward had eaten. Edmund? Is it Edmund or Edward? Edmund. That's one of my favourite books. Why don't I know his name? Edmund had eaten in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and like I felt like that when I was younger. So like I totally agreed with him there, and I was like, oh my god, I felt like that, and I was just so pumped when I was reading that. I also really like the mentions of Kate Atkinson in here because I love Kate Atkinson, and there was just so many little like Easter eggs, if you like, of like little diamonds about reading and authors and stuff like that. I really would recommend this to probably like my mum or my nan, but I think there's something for everyone in here, and I really loved it and found it really heartwarming and lovely, and again it's just a breath of fresh air. Really nice book. The next book I read was a little pamphlet book that David bought me for Easter because he's an absolute babe, and that is We Should All Be Feminist by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, you all know how much I love Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Americana. Americana is one of my favourite novels of all time. It was the best book I read last year, and I absolutely love it. So when I had seen this on a few people's channels that she has done this, so this is her TED talk about feminism, basically written down into a little book. It is tiny. It is a mere 48 pages long. I did read it in 2 sittings, but I'm going to go back and read it again. I'm going to do a full review on this because I just loved it so much. But this was the most educational, sensible, and sort of enlightening thing I had read about feminism ever. I sort of come to feminism I just guess I didn't understand feminism, and I always sort of, I needed to read this to realise what it meant. And I absolutely loved it. I was sort of like punching the air with joy about how accessible and enjoyable it was for me. Like for me, I think if you know more about feminism and you've read more feminism literature, I feel like this maybe might be a bit tame for you. What you've got to understand is that this was from a talk. So this has sort of been put down in writing from a talk. So it's not probably as in depth as some other literature on feminism would be. I think every woman should read this. I think everyone in the world should read this because I think it's just so easily accessible, and I gave it 4 stars because I just wanted more. And I'm going to go and watch her TED talk and find out if there is more to it. But yeah, I love this, and I just think it's published so beautifully as well. 4 for State, really do a good job. It's got some nice French flaps on here, and I love the front cover. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Very good. It's hard to pick a best book this month. I've had quite a lot of 4-star books. Ugh. The last book that I finished this month, let me get going on it. It's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying by Marie Kondo, and I'm going to get cross here. So if you enjoy this book, just turn away now, because if it hadn't been for the actual good tips in this book, now I don't deny that there are good tips in this book. For example, if you want to sort all your clothes out, then get every single item of clothing you've got, put it on the floor, and then sort it out from there. I think that would help me, and only keep items which spark joy. I agree with that, and I think, yeah, maybe that's something I would do. I would have given up on this a long time ago if it hadn't have been for the good tips. So I can't actually believe I finished this. But I was so infuriated when reading this about the sort of like bonkers claims that this woman had that are just so unfounded. So like one of them was saying, why don't leave your shampoos and conditioners on the side of the bath, tidy them away, because if you leave them out they will become exposed and less effective, which is shit. Something else was that you should, a lot of her clients had said that after they decided to keep their house tidy, they found that they lost a lot of weight and also that all their spots cleared up. That's just shit as well. This was just so preachy. If it hadn't have been for the good bloody tips that it gave, some of the good tips it gave, which I gave, the reason I gave this 2 stars, like I wouldn't have finished this and I would have been furious. Do not even get me started on the part in which she says, wear something feminine and floaty to bed so you can feel more ladylike. What does that even mean? Like who? Oh, infuriated me. So yeah, that's going. And she also said, don't hang on to books you don't like. Oh my God, let me tell you this last thing as well. She said what you should do with your books is if you really like books, then go through your books, tear out the pages of the parts you like in the books and put them into a folder and then discard the ruined book. I would rather just give the book away. Don't tear pages out of books. That's a disgusting thing to do. I was in actual shock. And guess what? I'm going to tear all the fucking pages out of this and chuck it in the bin. Because that's how angry it made me. Now, I am currently reading... I'm in the middle of reading 2 books and I'm listening to an audiobook. I've spoken about these before on this channel, the audiobook before, and that is A Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell, which I'm listening to on audiobook, as I said, and I'm really enjoying this. It's about a woman who moves to Denmark, well, I always want to say Daneland, but I mean Denmark, and her husband has a job working for Lego. It's really enjoyable. It's like talking about all the stuff that I'm actually interested in, like, so what it's like to eat in Denmark, where you can get your groceries, where you go and just like the stuff that I'm interested in, and I'm really loving it. The narrator has a bit of an annoying voice, but the content is so good I'm just being able to get straight past that, and it's just made me really interested in Scandinavia in general, and yeah, I really like it, so it's going very well. I'm got about 5 hours left, so I've still got quite a lot of time in there. I'm also in the middle of reading The Husband's Secret by Leanne Moriarty. I'm reading this for my book club at work. I'm 94 pages through. I've read this before. It is about a group of women who are all sort of like loosely linked, and one of those women finds a letter that her husband has written that says, please only open in the event of my death, and she sort of like rings him up like, what is this about, and he poo-poos it and says, oh, don't read it, it's something really embarrassing. Well, it's not, it's something pretty horrific. So that hasn't happened yet, but as I said, I have read this before. Yeah, as far as like contemporary things go, I quite enjoy it, and it's it does keep you interested. It's set in Australia, and yeah, I'll keep going with it. And the last book I'm still reading is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is the illustrated edition by Alice Patullo. I started this at the beginning of the month as a buddy read with Eleanor from Eleanor Reads Books and a few other ladies, but just sort of fell behind with it and then haven't been able to, but have been picking it up recently. It's my home book. I can't carry this around with me, so it's my sort of like lay in bed, read it in the bedtime book. It is just beautiful. The illustrations are lovely. Look at these dresses at the top. Look, what a perfect page to open up at. It's just gorgeous and it's a joy to read, and I'm happy it's taken me a long time to get through it, because I'm able to really appreciate all the illustrations and the story again. So those are the books that I read in March. Now it was a race for which was the best book out of these four. So no 5-star books. No 5-star books this year, actually. 1 minute left. No 5-star books this year. I think this is probably my favourite book of the month. Or Jane the Fox and Me, or JB Vickrey. These 3 are my favourite books of the month. Maybe this one most. But these 3 are the best. What were your favourite books in March? I would love to hear what you've been reading. Give me a little comment below if you want to chat about any of these books in the comments. I would be happy to do so. And I'll see you all again soon for another BookTube video.